Show you how to make this 5-stone dress ring. One of the main challenges of making a ring like this is to space the stones perfectly so that they're just touching when it comes to setting the stones. I'm having the stones graduate down from the centre, from centre one being 4.8mm, and then we've got 3.8mm, and then we've got 3mm on the ends there. Now the good thing about this design is you can pick either all the same size stones, or you could even have an oval shape or square shaped stone in the centre. There's lots of options with this. Now I've got a strip of sterling silver that is 1.2mm thick, and the width is 6mm, so it's wider than it needs to be, but we're going to do some cutting and carving later on. And the length of it will cover the arrangement of stones times 2 and add a little bit more. And you can always use the side of the bench peg as well, so just cradle it into the bench peg like that. Try and get a nice right angle going to start with. I'm using my nylon hammer to hammer it tighter. I'm going to use my ring bender to form the head of the ring, and I've not nominated a size as yet, so I'll just go for an average size of M, and the middle section of the ring bender fits the profile pretty well, and it will start opening up here a little bit, but we'll just squeeze that down. You can use medium. So I'll just put a little scratch there, so that'll be an indication of where the last stone should go. Beeswax along there, and enough so that the stones will hold in place upside down whilst I do some marking out. So pop the centre one right between those lines. And I do find that Pro Cut is really handy when it comes to this kind of intense burring. It really helps. So I'm going right through the middle there to see if that 2.5mm burr will work for that. I think it will for the top tier. I might just change over for the bottom one. Just they're overlapping. Oh, it looks as though they're going to overlap. Make sure the holes are all in line, which they are now, and we'll just check the 2 end stones before we open them up to the right size. So just place the stones on. Help me to shape it, so just cut in like so. We can finish off the ends later when what we need to do is support the whole thing when we cut the ends off. I'll show you how to do that shortly, but just chop away what we don't need. So you can hit it with your file at this stage if you want, but it's a bit more efficient if you can do a lot of cut work like this. And if you haven't got a 3 square hand file, you can use a flat file with the safety edge one way, and then the other way. If that was straight like that, it's just turned a little bit, so it just makes the bottom tier slightly tighter. So fine tune the settings, file them all into shape, get rid of all the lumps and bumps, and on the underside it should look a little bit thinner and smaller than the top side. So I'll pull the wire to 0.8 of a mil, and I think that's going to look pretty good and not too bunched together. Plenty of thickness for setting later on as well. Sure that you keep the angle correct, so you can see it there, that it's slightly angled to follow the contour of the filing that you did before. And what that does is, if you follow that line down to the center point of the ring later on, when it is a complete ring, you'll find that all these points come to the very center. The stone's in place, and what should happen is when you put the claw wire into the groove, it should just budge the stones or touch them enough to move them a little bit. So that means that when it comes to setting, you're going to have to put a little bit of a cut into the claw wire. Your chain nose plier is the very point of it, so we want to get a really nice tight bend right in the middle there. So you want it to hold tight enough that you can get them all in place and do the soldering in one hit. So make sure each one is comfortable in the groove there. That one needs a little. Because we're going to be far enough away from this solder joint here that it shouldn't cause a problem. Okay, once you've done that, pickle it and then we'll take a look. Ends off, and start working on putting the shank on it. And then this is the wire that I was going to use for the shank. It's 2.5mm square, and looking at it now, I think it's going to be too small to make a decent shank, because I want the shoulders to have enough width that I can just line up the claws and tuck them in on the just where the crease will be. So that's too small, so change of plan. I've rolled out a piece of silver that's 3mm square. This is 30mm long. Doesn't look very long for a shank. That's because I'm going to step roll the middle bit. Hopefully by this stage you've had some practice of doing this kind of step rolling. It's pretty easy to do. So you just find the wire section that fits the best in the middle there, and just clamp the very center of the strip and squeeze the rolls together. So I can now roll it up as far as the marker that I've just put. It's not very far, so it doesn't feel like you're doing much. But then loosen it off before you go too far, because if you go too far you're going to pinch it. So you can see it's getting a little bit sharp there. So put it back in the same one, so that the sharpness is now facing up, and I'm turning the handle, squeezing it, and tightened up again to give it a little bit more length there. We'll just see where we're at. So this will just help it step up to the height as it meets the setting. Going to form it with the ring bender. First of all, turn up the two ends in the smallest part and then bring them together. It's going to look tiny, but we're going to still do a little bit of forming to get just seen me do, because it's really worthwhile. It makes such light work of making the shank part of a ring. Kind of made that look a bit too easy. I've got one side right, just need to take a little bit out of the bottom of this side, and that's acting like a glue, so I'll just stop for a minute and I'll check to make sure it's lined up by looking at it this way and this way. And once I've done this side, I'll go back to the other side, because I only put a little bit of solder in place. Because I might need to stick it on my ring stick and or mandrel and get it to the right size, so that obviously will be done when all this comes away. Okay, make sure there's no gaps. Done the solder up. In a perfect place. I want them lopsided. I'm using my saw blade just to cut the top tier. If you now cut your U-shapes and fit them in. Making sure that when they're in position, just move this one over. Okay, do the rest now. And now we'll solder the last of the claws. The bottom of the claws. Being very careful not to cut into the setting, well, because these claws are quite fine and will probably bend down. Get it to the right size, then we're going to finish off filing it, getting the shank into the right shape, so just work on that now. And then if you're going to hallmark it as soon as you've got the correct width. I just need to take a little bit more off this. Because then you can use a knife edge needle file, just wrap some emery around it and try and clean off any tool marks that way. But then finish off, because all the drag lines will be going one way. So what you want to do is finish off with your burnisher and just cross direction like that. Cleaning up around fine claws like this, it's not as aggressive as using a mop, and you can work around the top of the setting as well with this. The ring's now finished and it's ready for setting.